Welcome everyone to our online webinar themed Connecting with the Polarization of Our World. I'm here with my good friend and Dharma brother, Aiki brother, Miles Kessler, and we're opening this discussion as a an opening exploration into our seminar that will be happening in the beginning of the first weekend of June, the Riviera seminar here held in Montreux, Switzerland. And we'll be continuing this exploration of this theme of connecting with the polarization of our world. Good evening, Miles. How are you doing?
Yeah, great, Patrick. Nice to be here and sharing this space with you once again. It's been a while since we've done this.
Actually, yeah.
So it's nice.
Yeah, and we had actually done was it the year before last, we had done the Riviera seminar online, and I think that was our last collaboration online. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what comes up from this very intriguing and challenging theme of polarization, the polarization that we're experiencing in our world these days. And I think it's something that is collectively being experienced throughout the world, and it's been something that has been stimulated from our experience of the pandemic and continuing to be stimulated with the war in Ukraine. But it has been we've felt it since the January 6th riots in Washington, and it just seems to be systemic right now throughout so many different layers and levels of our experience, our society and our culture, and I think also internally, individually, the feel I get for what people are saying is that they are experiencing a lot of polarization or a sense of division within themselves and at the internal level. But I was hoping, I know that you are very adept at exposing and exploring the polarities that we all experience, both in our practice of Aikido, which is a very interesting place to play with polarities, but also within our psycho-spiritual structure. And I was hoping you could just kind of maybe lay out a certain territory for us with regards to what this means for you.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. Well, I mean, look, I don't think it's an exaggeration. Just quick question. Because I still see Patrick. Is my picture?
Your picture is up.
Well, okay, awesome, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Great.
Okay.
So I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that we are living in perhaps the most polarized times, certainly in my lifetime. I mean, there was, I was quite young in the 60s. I was, just an infant in the 60s. So I wasn't around during all the countercultural revolution stuff that was happening back then. But it seems pretty intense, and it was intensified by two things. Number one was the pandemic, which put everybody pretty much in a survival mode. And okay, that's natural that when we get confronted with such a kind of, all of us get confronted, nobody's escaping this, confronted with such an existential situation, it makes sense that we contract down. That's makes total sense. But it's also been exasperated by social media because the social media algorithms are basically pumping out controversial stuff, probably 10 times more than it pumps out nice stuff. So when we see our feeds, we see things that, what is that doing on my feed? And it's so outrageous. And the more clicks it gets, the more it gets pumped. And it just, it got quite fueled. So, and there's way more. I don't want to oversimplify it, but it's quite a phenomena. And as an Aikidoka, as a meditator, as a meditation teacher, as an Aikidoka and an Aikido teacher, and as somebody who is just kind of passionate about truth, and especially evolving truth, It was as unsatisfying as social media can be sometimes. It's also nice sometimes. And as unsatisfying certainly as the pandemic was, there were a few good things that were actually, I enjoyed the silence. I enjoyed the isolation to a certain extent. But as unsatisfying as all of that is, what was really unsatisfying and still continues to be unsatisfying for me is this polarization that we're seeing in the world. We're seeing it politically, crazy. We're seeing it nationally, nationalistically. We see, there's a war in the middle of Europe right now. We see it in, around health issues and pandemic issues and vaccine or no vaccine or vaccine hesitancy or pro-vaccine or mandate, no mandate, all that stuff. It's just like, it's getting crazy and wild. And, I believe, and I know Patrick also believes this, that, when things become at the most intense, it's also a wake-up call for us to evolve. And it's almost like if these things don't happen, we don't get a kick in the backside to really pay attention and evolve. I'm guessing you agree with that, Patrick. I don't know if I.
Absolutely. No, you're right on. I resonate with what you're saying.
So I really believe that now it's as always, evolve or die. We know what it's like if we don't face this and get a handle on the polarities. But we actually, this is a perfect opportunity to do that. Now, in order to do that, we have to come to some kind of first principles. And, Aikido is an art, just like meditation is an art of first principles, that it's not founded on Ikkyo, Nikkyo, Sankyo. It's not founded on Iwama style, Aikikai, Ki style. It's not founded on this teacher, that teacher, the other teacher. We could say that it's founded on O Sensei, but that's all downstream of the source of Aikido, which is some universal principle, which means it's basically it's valid. This principle is valid all times, all places, all circumstances. It is always, forever, always was, always is, and always will be valid as long as there's duality in the world. As long as there are two rocks floating around the universe that can bump into each other, there will be conflict. That's just the way it is. It's going to be that way. And Aikido is the beautiful answer to that. Now, I'll say one more thing. Sam Harris, who's this kind of thought leader, I like him a lot. He says that, the evolution of human civilization, if we look back over, I guess, in the history that we know, maybe 100,000 years, or certainly the last few thousand years, we see, civilization evolving, moving through stages of development, evolving, becoming more global. He says that the progression of the evolution of human civilization is nothing more than a series of successful conversations. Okay, now think about that. That means that we can sit down with our differences, with our love and hatred and all the good, the bad, and the ugly. We can sit down and we can work things out to the point where we find the truth, the goodness, and the beauty in all things, and we evolve together. Now that's a fact. That's and whenever things are breaking down, as we see at certain places in the world today, we don't have to look too far. When things are breaking down or falling apart, it's because there's no successful conversations happening. And when there's an intense polarization, it's very difficult to have those successful conversations. And for me, and I'll pass this to Patrick, for me, Aikido, the ideal of Aikido, the philosophy of Aikido, the principle of Aikido, that Aiki moment is actually an expression of a successful conversation, not verbally, but interrelationally, physically. Mm-hmm. So that's a few things, Patrick.
I like the way you're bringing that up in terms of successful conversation, and I think there's a lot of unpacking we could do with regards to what we mean by that, specifically in terms of a satisfying connection that we have with another person when we train, and when we move within a certain way of being with them that feels satisfying to both self and other, even in the midst of conflict, where the expression of Aikido is fundamentally is life positive, life creative. And I think that for me would be a sign of a successful conversation where both sides are honored, and yet as they come together, they create something new out of that conversation. And I think as we're facing some of the polarization from my perspective comes from the fact that we are challenged. We're at a level of facing a certain challenge at the collective experience of ourselves. Climate change, environmental degradation, the loss of biodiversity, and the fundamental movement into a realization through the pandemic. I think the pandemic was a beautiful illustration that we exist in a systemic world. We exist as a collective. And there's no way that one part of the collective can solve the problem of the pandemic by excluding another part of the collective. We either do this together or we don't. This is a movement, a radical shift in the way we psychologically identify ourselves as groups, as communities, as nations, as races. And we're moving into a collective recognition that we exist as a human race. This is a shift in maturity of humanity, that we exist to a certain degree. Our welfares are linked and tied together throughout our global identity. This movement towards a new experience of ourselves is like giving birth to a new experience of ourselves, and that giving birth can be filled with contractions. The birthing process is not necessarily an easy one, and as we face moving into an unknown experience of ourselves, because evolution is drawing us towards a new experience of ourselves, we are faced with a certain level of losing what we know, what we are comfortable with. And as we're faced with the need and the call to evolve, as you put it, Miles, there is the feeling that I'm going to lose what I know, what I have, who I am as myself. And so there's this pull, there's this an immediate polarity that I think can feel in a certain level of being in an antagonistic relationship. The desire for something new, the impulse to evolve into a new experience of ourselves, and that reluctance, that kind of attachment to who we are right now, and the fear of losing what we know. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing. The appreciation of where we're at and who we are in our lives collectively, I think, maybe not globally, but to a large extent, collectively, we are experiencing probably the most prosperous time that we've ever experienced as human beings. And the feeling and the threat of feeling that we're going to lose that by moving into new territory can stimulate us at our physiological survival level, where we feel like we're being threatened. And when our system starts to get threatened, and we can't see, the pandemic was a great example, as we're threatened by an externality, but we don't have any particular target with which to blame or to point to an enemy within the pandemic, because the pandemic was basically, we were threatened by something that is not an individual. It's not locatable. It's something that was pervasive.
Across all boundaries. Yeah,
exactly. So there's no way of identifying an enemy, and because psychologically, our biology evolutionarily, it stimulated us to feel under threat, to identify the source of the threat. And by identifying the source of the threat, we separate and we use different ways of managing that. And that's something that just physiologically we develop through our biology over time. And
largely reactive ways of dealing with it.
exactly. And that's where the fight, flight, and freeze reactivity shows up. It's hardwired into our system. So when we are now faced with facing a threat which is collective, so there's nobody to blame per se, and we are all fundamentally in the same boat. We're all facing the same challenge, although some people have more difficult times with it than others. I mean, obviously, if you're living in a small room in the suburbs of Paris with eight other family members, it's a very different experience than if you have to lock down in a big luxurious villa in Switzerland. So, you know, it's not that everybody was impacted in the same way, but we're all facing it. We're all facing the same thing. And this, in a certain degree, is a radically different way of operating. We're starting to become a collective experience of ourselves. And that's a new experience that I think requires us to move into unknown territory. And I think we're called to do that. So many aspects of our lives are pointing that we need to evolve in relationship to our experience in relationship to nature, and experience in relationship to our society and the way we function as a society, and in relationship to the multiculturalism that we are experiencing in so many ways. And through the Me Too movement, through so many different things, are calling for us to become more collective and global and more fundamentally integrated with each other, and to experience ourselves as the human race rather than as separate elements that are in opposition to other elements within the world. So this calling to integrate with life does threaten us at the physiological level, because it means that we are losing perhaps the way we experience ourselves and the life that we've had up till now. So we have this polarization of a desire or a call to evolve, and the reactivity that maybe keeps us in touch, or wants us to keep in touch with that which we have attained.
Right, both intelligences, by the way.
Yes.
One's a survival intelligence, and the other is an evolving intelligence.
And in a way, they're both survival, and they're both to a certain degree, because we have to evolve in order to survive. But and the appreciation of what we have received, what we have attained so far within the human race, is also an incredibly valuable and important quality to honor. If we can engage both polarities as being valuable and having something inherently important to present, then we might be able to navigate this transition into a new experience of ourselves. But if we see it as being, we had a conversation earlier, Miles and I, if we see these two polarities being in opposition, the need to evolve or the resistance to evolve, or the desire to honor what we have and the fear of the unknown, then we can fall into a polarization within ourselves, as well as the desire to kind of collectively draw circles around the groups that we feel comfortable with. I feel comfortable with Maz. I don't feel comfortable with you. So we're going to draw a circle around me and Miles, and we're going to blame or in some way polarize ourselves with those people who feel different than us. And that, I think, is a very common experience when a person feels threatened, is to suddenly draw themselves into a collective, a group of like-minded people where they feel more at ease, more supported, more comfortable, and they can start to satisfy that evolutionary principle of looking for the threat external to the group that I exist in. And I think there is a reason that the polarization in our world is showing up. And I think it's a sign of the recognition that we are moving into new territory. And I think it's a reaction to that calling, that call to evolve, that we are feeling on a deep level of ourselves, and the fear of the fear that can bring up, because we're moving into territory that we have no way of being able to map out, because it by definition, evolution is a step into something that isn't a repetition of our past experience, but it's literally a step into something that goes beyond our experience, into new territory of who we are, both individually and collectively. I don't know if that makes sense, Miles. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, and I think it would be good to actually look at how we work with polarities, and then maybe let everybody go into a breakout. I do want to say one thing. If I again, it's not so much about vaccine, pro-vaccine or vaccine hesitancy, or pro-Russia, pro-Ukraine, whatever the polarities that we're seeing today. We are in global warming. No, it's just a light, one of the Earth cycles. But there's all these different things that we can go into, and we argue about those things. We are downstream from the first principle, and the first principle I think is important. Like Hegel nailed it. Hegel said that the truth is nothing more than the emerging dialectic. That we must have a dialectic. And when the dialectic, under the right conditions, when the dialectic is held in the right way, under the right conditions, something will emerge. The truth will emerge. That's Aikido. For example, freedom of speech. It's kind of what the democratic societies are founded on. That it's absolutely everybody has a right to speak freely, except you can't yell fire inside of a crowded movie theater. There has to be some balance there. And it's when the principle meets the reality of the relative world is when we have that dialectic. So it's very important to understand that. And another thing that's important to understand is that not all a polarity is a polarity, but not all polarities are the same. There are positive, negative polarities. In other words, right and wrong. When those two polarities are together, positive, negative polarity will never create a dialectic. It will not create a dialectic. It will not create a dialectic. If it doesn't create a dialectic, nothing evolves, nothing emerges out of it. A positive, negative polarity can't create a dialectic. Positive polarity can. For example, masculine, feminine is a positive polarity. White and black, light and dark, open, closed, discipline, surrender, homeostasis, heterostasis, liberal and conservative, contract and expand, yin and yang. These are positive dialectics, polarities, excuse me. And when they press against each other, they create the conditions for some emerging truth to happen. So first, in whatever way we're going to work with this, connect with the polarities for the purpose of evolving to a greater perspective, we have to understand a few things. That it only works under positive. That means that I need to, I'll confess, I'm kind of anti-Putin these days, personally, especially since I see what's going on. Sure, maybe I'm just getting the Western view, but I know there's a lot of Russians that are kind of anti-West. They're pro-Putin. Polarity. The only way and I haven't done this exercise, but the only way for me to actually enter into some type of dialectic is to first steelman the opposite polarity. And perhaps you've heard of straw manning, where we just put all the, we make an example, we put all the trash in there. But this is opposite. This steel manning is actually seeing what is valid about that perspective. And like during the Trump years, I was doing this on a regular basis because I was quite triggered. If there's any Trump supporters here, this is not really I could go there, but it's not a criticism of it. But that was my own personal practice that I constantly, I wasn't moving to the middle. I wasn't accepting everything. I still had my stand, what I believe is true based on principles. But I would, as a practice, I would try to straw man that position. And by doing that, it evolved my perspective. It didn't change the way I feel about it. I still have the opinions I had back then. I still have them, but I also have a little bit more, nuance to it. So that, and if you think of conflict in Aikido, if the other person is wrong, we'll never heal the conflict. We'll never move towards wholeness. We have to align with where the person's coming from. We can't change the person. I can't change the other point of view, but I can align with what is true. When I align with what is true, the things that are false about that perspective start to become illuminated, and they kind of fall away. And then it creates the conditions for some dialect, for something to emerge. But that something can only emerge if we hold our truths, align with the other person's truth, let what's false kind of fall away. And to do that, we have to actually let go of our identity politics and our tribalism and all those things. Really align with what's the true principle there. And then this is Aikido. It's straight Aikido. It also happens to be straight meditation. That we have the dualities coming together, creating under the right conditions, then something will emerge beyond that duality. And it is always novel. That means it's always new. Even if it's been produced or repeated 1,000 times before, the experience of that truth coming out is always a movement of novelty.
What you're pointing to in terms of it being in relationship to Aikido, I think when we break it down into the physicality of actually meeting Uke and Nage, where Nage is able to actually be with the energy of Uke without necessarily creating separation or, as you put it, straw manning Uke, and fundamentally allowing for a connection which is integral, that allows for a relationship where you start to see, I'm in relationship with this opposing polarity force, and that opposing polarity force is actually part of this larger context that I identify with. I'm also this one polarity, but I'm also the relationship that contains both polarities. And when I can feel that, and I can feel the balance of these two energies and being able to honor both sides and be able to feel the quality of both sides, then there's this kind of facilitation of the opposition into a newer state of itself. And we can align with it. We can perform maybe alchemy, if we could even say that, where these two energies come together and create something greater than the sum of its parts, larger than just the two elements. These two energies, when they come together in that life positive relationship, then something radical can show up. And this is experience. This is experiential in Aikido itself at the physical level, which is such a great doorway if you can get it. Maybe not in every encounter you have in Aikido, but the possibility of having that and tasting that and experiencing that, where you bring and facilitate a movement and a creative process when two opposing forces come together, and you're able to frame that experience, and it becomes these two opposing forces become a life positive, life creative event, and we can experience that at the physical level under pressure. Then this helps give perhaps a confidence to do this in a larger way with our social milieu, with our society, with our relationships in the larger context, and where we are actually able to have a certain faith in being able to meet that opposing polarity with the creativity and the curiosity of wanting to meet it as at the source of its impulse. What does it truly want? What does it deeply want? And what is its voice wanting to express? What is its voice wanting to share? Rather than making it into an antagonist, you make it into a fundamental polarity that you can align with, you can co-create with, you can collaborate with. I don't know if I'm expressing this similar perspective, but it does seem that we are looking at something that we can bridge from our practice of Aikido and potentially use that as a roadmap for meeting the polarization that we're experiencing in the world today.
So maybe we can go into a practice, but before that, I do want to remind everybody that today we're just having a conversation. We're going to let you guys go on a break and have a conversation. But this is, Patrick and I are really we love to do this. We really love it, but we even love more to do it in Aikido, to get on the mat with a group of people, exploring these things for 2, 3 days, 4 days, and just going deep. And it does go deep. And we're going to do that in about 6 weeks, right, Patrick? In June,
first
in the river.
weekend of June 3rd to the 5th there.
So if anybody's around Montreux, Switzerland, or in Europe, or even in the States, buy your ticket now. Come join us. It's actually the first time we're doing this in 2 years or 3 years. 2 years.
3 years. Yeah. I think it's been a 2-year break. Yeah. So it's
that's right. So it'll be so we'd love to have you. Anyways, I think what's important to understand about before we practice is Tara wrote something really nice on in the chat. She said some positive polarities are easier to recognize. Yeah, yin and yang is more or less easy to recognize than others. Some are easy for some of us, me at least, to perceive as positive, negative. And I think first we have to understand that is our biological bias, that we are hardwired to survive. And understanding what's negative, what's dangerous in life, even if it's projection, is a survival mechanism. So we got to understand that. And we know that in Aikido, that doesn't work because, at least in Aikido, we're trying. So one of the things that we can do, it might be a good exercise, Patrick, is this, identify, number one, identify right now, everybody, you can even write this down. What is one polarity that you just have a hard time with? Can't be hard. These days, it can't be hard. Write it down on a piece of paper right now. Pick one. It could be a relationship you have with somebody in your family, or it could be, global politics. It could be the pandemic. It could be what else? An environment. It could be, those goddamn whatchamacallits and those stupid bleep, bleep, bleeps, anybody.
It could be something internal as well. It could be your desire to continue smoking. It could be something fundamentally that is an impulse that you feel polarized within your own psyche. Even, to a certain degree.
But make it clear.
Yeah, make it clear.
For the exercise, make it clear, and then write 3 things about it you don't like.
Yeah, and
okay?
there's one for me that's very interesting because you triggered it, Miles. Is the reactivity of fight, flight, or freeze. For an Aikido teacher, sometimes we polarize against that and say, okay, that reactivity is.
We have an aversion towards survival instincts.
Exactly. Yes.
So we shut down the intelligence there. Yeah, exactly.
Right. It's very intriguing because that in and of itself, the fact that we have that is not a bad thing. It's part of our.
It's an intelligence.
It's an intelligence.
It's intelligence.
Yeah.
It's just a lower intelligence. We have higher. So as an exercise, and we're going to use this to go into the breakouts. Write down your pole, the opposite pole that you think is just
life negative. Yeah.
Life negative. Write it down.
Life negative.
Or put it in your head. And now choose 3 things about it you don't like.
Yeah.
Boom, boom, boom. 1, 2, 3. All right. Now the exercise is, do you mind if I do this, Patrick? If I just
go for it. You got it. Go.
The exercise is to share that with your partner. We're going to go into breakout. Patrick, can you set the breakout groups of?
Yeah, I'll do it now.
I think 3 people is enough. 3 people in each room. The exercise as you go into your breakout is to share with your partner the opposite pole, and then the 3 things why you don't like that. So I confess that I have problems with Putin these days. I don't like him because he's aggressive as hell. He's a totalitarian dictator, and I don't know. Yeah, he kills people.
Yeah.
It seems like he's killing people. Not just in the Ukraine, but like journalists and political opponents, stuff like that. It's like, ugh. Okay, so I'd write that down. That would be what I share. That's exercise number 1. Everybody has their point. I'm gonna
all right.
I'm gonna wait. I'm not done yet.
Okay.
Okay, everybody has their point. Let me see your hand if you have your point. And you have your 3, more or less 3 things. Great. Okay, very good. So that's exercise number 1. And don't spend much time on that. Exercise number 2 is now say at least 1 thing positive about that pole. If you can say 2 things, mwah. If you can say 3 things, you're a champion. But we've got to steel man the opposite position. So if I implicate myself right now and I have to steel man Putin, I mean, I could say he's good at judo, but that's not really fair. That doesn't really compare. There's something about him that wants to revive. I actually believe that he truly wants to revive a Russian patriotism, from like old days. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, now the way he goes about it, I don't agree with, but that's me trying to steel man what's going on there. And that's the beginning of the polls starting to resonate together. Okay, is that clear? So again, I just off the top of my head, I just did an example, but you choose yours. And what's the problem? And if you had to steel man, what would you do? Okay.
All right. Okay. I'm just moving people around a little bit. Okay.
I guess this one, once you get going, it could take long, but because
So
we
you're going to
don't have
be,
a lot of time.
so everyone
10
will be,
minutes?
you'll either be in a group of 3 or 4. And just make sure that we would ask that as everyone expresses their perspective, that those people who are, if there's one person expressing their perspective, really give them the opportunity and listen deeply to what they have to say until they're finished, and then make that transition and really offer everyone the opportunity to listen without any interruption or any comments or any overspeak, if you can possibly make that happen. So really offer as deep listening as you possibly can. All right.
And give others a chance to speak too. So we got a limited time, 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
So make sure you do a round. And after the round, if you want to do a free conversation, then feel free.
Okay.
But not before.
Sounds great. Good. All right. And enjoy your conversation. We look forward to hearing what you have to share.
Yeah, since some people aren't joining, you might want to keep an eye, Patrick, on the make sure nobody's by themselves in the room.
Yeah, I'm looking at.
And then when we come back, look, I have to leave exactly a couple of minutes before. So when we come back, maybe just you can the thing is, if you do harvest, it takes a lot of time.
No, we don't have to. Yeah, but we could offer people maybe comments.
Bring in some voices. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bring in the voices, and for my case, since we're really limited on time, I don't even have to speak. I'll just listen and maybe say a word or two. But I think it's better that we let the community have some voice. And if you're going to stay on, then you can expand it out afterwards.
Let's see here.
Speaking of polarities.
Yes. Do you see who's in the waiting?
Of course. But, we have to practice what we preach. So
okay.
Just, as long as you control the microphone, I think that'd be the best.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I'm going to get some water.
Okay, good. Can you unmute, Miles?
How are we doing on time?
Good. I think another maybe,
Like 5 minutes or something?
yeah, 5.
Hang on just a second. So how was the first part? How did it work for
It
you?
was
Okay.
good. I think there's just so much here to open up and discuss that.
That's why we got to keep it simple, like down to principles.
But it just
And
it's as soon as you start talking, I'm like going, oh yeah, and
oh, totally.
yeah.
That's
So
a good thing.
it is a good thing. It is a good thing, and I think it's opened up, at least for me, a creative impulse with regards to this theme, because it is such a triggering theme. Then people fall into,
It's also rich.
yeah.
It's
We have,
it's a gold mine. You know, when you hit the vein,
yeah,
it just there's so much value to mine there.
yeah. And that sense of being on the edge, where you fall into, even to a certain extent, polarization with the experience of polarization itself. You know, just being in,
Well, yeah, sure.
in antagonistic relationship with the way things are, and not seeing the opportunity that it presents.
Well, like you said, having aversion towards any type of conflict. You know, that we're supposed to be a spiritual community, we're supposed to be an Aikido community, and we shouldn't have any contact. Then any conflict, and then everything becomes passive aggressive and conflict. The fact is, it's just there. You can't deny it.
The conflict with the experience of conflict, right? That's it.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's good. So when we bring people back, what do you want to do? Do you want to do like maybe let one or two people just share what came out of their group, maybe the first couple of hands that come up, and then see if there's any clarifying questions or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do that. Okay, I'm gonna
Ping them back.
I'm gonna give them a 2-minute warning.
Okay, great. I will be right back. Sorry, I just had a few bites of my dinner. I mean, as soon as we're done here, I've got another hour and a half to go. So
I know. You take it while you
squeeze it in if I can.
Yeah.
So you moved today, huh? Or you're still moving?
Yeah, no, we're still moving. Anyway, I'm closing the rooms now.
Great. Nope, they got another minute.
Oh.
Yeah, when you close the room, it's a 60-minute countdown,
All
60-second
right. Okay.
countdown.
60 seconds, yeah.
But I guess some people are coming back. Hey, there's Richard. Hey, Richard, how's it going? Nice to see you. I was just talking about you. I was talking with Oni Stevens, and your name came up. I don't even know what it was for or something. I know what it was. We're looking at doing a retreat at some center that you used to work at or something like that. Anyways, me baby having one of these Dutch names. There's Michael. 15 seconds to go.
Good to see Christopher. It's good to see you, Chris.
Hey, Chris. Nice to see you.
All right.
Voila.
Good. I think we're back.
How
Well,
was
welcome.
that?
Yeah, welcome. I hope the conversation was satisfying. We were hoping to give you an opportunity to share some insights or whatever may have come up in the conversation, and then we'll maybe perhaps give an opportunity for questions or later on comments to be fielded. But if there's anybody in your group that would like to express something that came up in your dialogue or your discussion with your group members, please go ahead and raise your hand electronically, and we will unmute you and give you an opportunity to speak to the group as a whole.
Yeah, and we have about 10 minutes left, and I think Patrick can stay after a little bit. I'm not sure.
Sure, for a few minutes.
But we'll finish right on the hour, just because I know some.
Okay. All right. So do we have anybody that has something they would like to offer or share? Okay. Sophia. Oop. Hold on. I lost you there. Okay, hold on. Let's see. There we are. There you are. Hi, Sophia.
Hi. So my question is, as I learned in my Aikido practice, my teacher told me we can only do, he said, don't try and do higher level Aikido if you haven't got, level, what we would call level 1. So to acknowledge the danger, and then we engage with it and we can move it to another level. So I feel concerned if the aim is to move to conversation in situations where there is a malicious intent. And in a sense, I feel there's a acknowledging malicious intent is a form of respectfully meeting an opponent. And I have seen situations in which when an opponent with malicious intent is met and seen and it's called and it's named, often they then feel actually seen. But if the aim is to, how can I say, to seek an alignment of which there is none.
No, there's not. That would be about.
If you see what I mean, there's an element. I think you're getting me that notion of yeah.
If there's malicious intent, there's like positive, negative. So aligning with the malicious intent is kind of the only thing that we can defend, and it's still going to be zero sum. Okay, if you have to defend in zero sum, you have to run away. It's zero sum. That you have to agree to disagree. That's fine. That's all zero sum. But the only way to get the positive sum, the only way to get the healing is, as you said, align with it. And then there's grace. It just maybe the situation will, you just don't know until you're out there if it'll change or not. And then it might move into a positive polarity. And then things can happen.
Thank you.
I think what you're pointing to, Sophia, is that oftentimes we can get trapped into our inability to actually accept the existence of that malicious intent, to say that shouldn't be happening. And I know that, a lot of people are experiencing certain things in the world and they say that should not be happening right now. And when they say that, there's a certain level of not just being able to meet that other intent, but that they polarize in such a way that they deny the fact that it even exists. And when we can't even accept the fact that something exists, if we can't accept the fact that something exists, we cannot respond to it. And so being able to open up to the simple acceptance of the existence of that malicious intent brings us into a place where we actually acknowledge that it exists. And that opens up just to the ability to respond to it without falling into a state of denial to a certain degree. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but for me, that is that first step. And for me, that's where Aikido starts to open up, is that we can actually acknowledge the existence of that malicious intent without framing it in such a way that we're unable to even meet it. So if we can acknowledge the existence without sugarcoating it, without losing the recognition of its, as you point, its malicious intent, we can begin to respond. So, okay, good. Thank you for the question.
Great, Sophia. Thank you.
Anybody else would like to offer or share?
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. I
Yes.
don't know your name. Who is that?
Yes, hello. This is Dana.
Hello, Dana.
Sorry, I couldn't change my name. Hello. Yes, I named it differently, but she named it very well, Sophia. It was just connecting with someone or groups of people that are so beyond even the possibility to connect. And we can't even connect, because they're like, chef d'etat and up there, big people controlling the world. So people that consciously do wrong, if you can put it that, or do bad, or do hurtful things. That's really what I'm struggling with now in myself, because that's what I've been struggling for so many years, is realizing how I do hurtful things that can be hurtful to others, and how I can be hurtful to myself, and then learning to see that and why I do that. And what are my defense mechanisms why I do that, and to heal that, heal it. And I mean, that's really what seems like the evolution process is all about. So I'm really having a hard time finding the goodness, the positive, the steel man. And I mean, maybe some other people can talk about that, can help me or help us, because I think we're living that communally, because Sophia brought it up too. So I think it's a big question. How do we find positive? Not in the outcome. The outcome is it makes me work. I see that, how it makes me work.
That's great. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah. but what is in themselves, like, that is actually positive about that? Is there something in their innate? I see the result. I'm not talking about the result. The result can be, yes, bringing people together, making us choose our making choices.
Yeah, listen, I think it's clear. I just want to, I'm sorry to cut you, but I've got to leave in 3 minutes.
Good.
So, but I did get your question. Patrick, you mind if I go just really quick? I'll keep it short.
Go for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Listen, the fact is that for us to come to some type of Aiki solution, where it's kind of positive sum, we come to a new understanding, there's a healing and a wholeness, healing of the conflict and moving to wholeness. For that to happen, certain conditions are necessary. And one of those conditions is that those who haven't grown up yet have to grow up. I mean, that's just a fact. And this is not saying that they're immature, I'm immature, I'm more mature, not to say any of that, but if there's some less evolved parts, because what you're talking about is already an evolved perspective. Aikido is a rather evolved perspective. What we have to evolve to a certain level of maturity before we can even attempt to do this stuff. So what helps people evolve is just recognize them where they're at. So I say this all the time, we meet people where they're at, but in a different way, but hopefully don't leave them where they're at. So that's the best that we can, if somebody's not ready to meet us, we cannot force depth of consciousness on anybody. Just try and it's going to fail. Just can't happen. The best we can do is meet people where they're at. And hopefully, I mean, think of the therapeutic moment when somebody finally lets go and all the defense mechanisms, it's like a house of cards collapses, they get it, and then they're just in a new place. So that has, certain conditions must be there. So in Aikido way, we keep our center, we extend, we connect, we meet people with that. And hopefully don't leave them where that. It's very related to what Sophia was saying. Sophia, sorry. Patrick?
I think, Dana, what you're bringing up, I think, is a common frustration, and I resonate with it quite a lot. And at the same time, I recognize that even Putin is a human being, and whatever he's doing for whatever reason, I assume that he is fundamentally following what he considers to be the best course of action based on his value structure. Now, the value structure may be immature, maybe deeply pathological, but it has been based on his fundamental experience, and he's attempting, and I think that everybody attempts to follow what they consider to be the best behavior that they possibly can bring to bear in their lives. Now, that doesn't negate that there's evil and terrible malicious behavior in the world, but it does mean that, okay, I get it. Their people are, in a way, kind of doing the best they can. And so when we meet them at that fundamental level of their humanity, and then we try to grasp how they came to their course of action, perhaps it can be an opportunity for us to be able to bring a larger sphere, larger circle of connectivity and integration, and still be able to hold true to perhaps a greater recognition that we exist as a fundamental system, and that we're bringing about a greater maturity into the world, and we have to be able to accept and at the same time take a stand on what we consider to be that maturity, and do the best we possibly can at that in the way we can with what we have to work with. So we're going to say goodbye to Miles. Miles has got another commitment coming up, and he's has to take a step out. I want to appreciate Miles's work and his willing to share this evening's call with us. But perhaps if we have an opportunity now for a couple more questions before we sign off tonight. I know everybody's got on a Sunday night, they've got things they've got scheduled. But if you'd like to share anything else, please feel free to raise your hand electronically and I will unmute you. Okay, I'm seeing Vic's iPad. Are you trying to? Okay. So excuse me, it's a little bit difficult to see those electronic hands. If there's anybody out there who is wanting to share, feel free to raise your hand. Okay. Well, with that being said, oh.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was trying to leave. I'm in Miles's group for the next meeting.
Got it. Okay, no problem.
But my screen's stuck.
Okay. All right. All right.
Bye.
Okay.
I was pointing to Richard Jacobson. I'm pointing because he's on my left on the
He's
screen.
on your left, but
He has his hand up.
all right, hold on. Let me get to Richard and see if I can find you. Richard. My screen is moving around all the time, so it's difficult to, there we are. Good, okay. Richard, how are you doing? You try that again. There you go.
Yes, better.
There,
Hello, everybody. Hello.
that's-
Nice to see you all again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's challenging times, already a few years, and what pops up in my in the life and in my awareness is the quest for solutions for freedom. To be honest, I'm quite, fed up with all the, I call it like bullshit in the world, and also with my own bullshit, and the longing for cleaning, even my inner cleaning from what is still troubling me, and where are the programs. I found out that some programs are just by education or school systems, or by parents who want to, of course, do good. Find out from, hey, I'm not this. I'm not really this kind of behavior. And I'm always hoping that we are find the solution in oneself. But it's quite challenging times, and I also get triggered, and people who are assuming things I noticed, or projecting things. And luckily, I'm not so interested in politics, so I don't mind Putin. I don't mind, everybody who's on the world stage. I think they're all a little bit like crazy in their heads. So my focus is on what do I want, and nature, I think, is my biggest teacher.
One of the words that came up that you just used is that sense of purifying. And in Aikido, we have that concept of misogi, purification, and there is a way of working with polarities that helps that process to a certain degree. And Miles has used this framework, and we've talked about it in seminars together, in this concept of polarizing to purify. And so that when you can allow yourself to take, especially if you're working with your own inner qualities, you take a polarization of one side, whether it's like, if it's in Aikido, maybe structure and flow, okay? And when we get into structure, and when we can appreciate structure, and when we get into flow and we can appreciate flow, and we can draw these two sides apart so that we can gain a better and deeper understanding of what they offer. And rather than being, in the Aikido world, you can often get, also in the yoga world as well, you can get the technical side, or you can get the internal energetic side, you can get the physical side, you can get the more ethereal spiritual side, and you can feel like they're in an antagonistic relationship with each other. But when you allow yourself to polarize and appreciate that polarity for what it has, the voice it has to share, and then you go to the other side and you do the same thing, and you recognize that these polarities are not in opposition to each other, but they're fundamentally complementary or collaborative, can be collaborative with each other, and by bringing them together can bring birth to something new. This is a way of, as you put it, to purify the system from being trapped in kind of a projection of being on one side and projecting the other polarity as being contrary or antagonistic to my well-being. And so when we allow ourselves to reach out, and this is, I think, to a certain degree, the technique of steel manning, when you take the other side and you actually embody it as a way to understand it, not as a way to marginalize your own perspective, or in a way find some middle ground, which is neither positive or negative, but as a way to fundamentally gain information about the perspective that you're facing. And when you can do that, I think it brings us to a place where we can start to appreciate the other voice of that polarity, and bring it, and hopefully bring about facilitation for a creative collaboration, rather than a destructive or antagonistic relationship that can create pain and suffering in our minds. And when we do that within our own systems, within our own, as you say, with our own bullshit, that we can hopefully start to bring about a greater appreciation for those parts of ourselves that we have, in a way, separated from, or marginalized, or somehow lost contact with. And this is the fundamental and this is not meant to be the theme of tonight's talk, but this is the fundamental relationship with doing any shadow work, is that we actually, to a certain degree, have polarized ourselves internally with certain domains of ourselves, and that creates the experience of having a certain part of our internal landscape in the unconscious or subconscious realm that we are unable to meet or unable to face. And that's actually that's the keys to working with polarity start to open up to being able to access perhaps some of those domains within ourselves that we feel very polarized with. And that is a purifying process. So thank you for sharing. And it's good to hear your voice.
Thank you.
Take care, Richard.
Bless you.
Yeah. And I think we can maybe call it an evening. I would like to share with all of you the opportunity to come together and work with us at the physical domain. We are, again, as Miles said, we're going to be doing the Riviera seminar the first weekend of June, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and we'll be doing another event following that. I want to make sure that I have that calendar and that I have it right here. Boom. Yes, June 3rd to June 5th. And you can find information on our website, rivieraseminar.com. And we'll also be doing a Monday event, going deeper, a non-Aikido event, but more of contemplative embodiment event on Monday, June 6th, which is a separate event. All that information is on the website, www.rivieraseminar.com. I will type that for everybody just so that you can see it.